Today, we've got Tesla's annual shareholder meeting on deck, which is always good for plenty of news. This is Tesla Tidbits episode number 412 for June 6th, 2018. All right, I'm going to order the show the way the information was presented in the meeting, rather than prioritizing by what might be the most important news. That way, if you didn't watch, you can kind of get the feel of the flow of the meeting. Also, as always, I'm going to try to only give you the most salient points, as this is going to be a super long show, again potentially threatening a record. Of course, we'll start the show with the official business of the meeting. Some waves had recently been made about the makeup of Tesla's board, where a couple of groups were urging shareholders to vote against the three board members up for re-election. The three were Kimball Musk, Antonio Gracias, and James Murdoch. On top of this, some were also pushing for the CEO role to be divorced from the chairman of the board role. The vote concluded with a supermajority agreeing to maintain the status quo, keeping all the directors up for re-election and keeping the CEO role combined with the chairman of the board role. With the boring stuff out of the way, Elon took the stage. He kicked things off by thanking everyone building and buying the cars, and then literally called other carmaker offerings soulless. Quote, "At Tesla, we build our cars with love, like we really care. At a lot of other companies, they're built by the marketing department and the finance department, and there's no soul, you know? We're not perfect, but we pour our heart and soul into the product, and we really care." End quote. Elon then took the opportunity to reiterate that all of production has demonstrated the capability to consistently produce 3,500 units per week. He moved on to say that they've just installed another set of upgrades and are now spinning the lines back up again following those upgrades. With those upgrades, he said, quote, "It's quite likely that we will achieve a 5,000 car per week by the end of this month," end quote. He paused and also quipped, quote, This is I'll tell you, the most excruciating, hellish several months I've maybe ever had, and a lot of other people at Tesla, but I think we're getting there," end quote. So, away from the negative, and now on to the good news. Tesla is killing the competition with Model 3. Model 3 is now the best-selling mid-sized premium sedan, bar none. That's any fuel type. Pretty amazing considering they're still not at the production level they want to be at. When they get there, they'll be embarrassing the competition day in and day out. Elon next touched on Model 3 reliability. As was predictable, a lot of cars came back to service centers at the beginning of production. Today, the quality has improved by, quote, "a factor of maybe 4 or 5 since the start of production," end quote. A huge boost in production quality. Next, we move to the discussion of factory safety. Year-to-date, Tesla is claiming an injury rate 6% below the industry average. And of course, always wanted to take a shot at the UAW, Elon boasted that the current injury rate is half that of when the plant was still run by Toyota and GM, and its workers were represented by the UAW. As a side note, Elon clarified that the vast majority of the injuries at Fremont are repetitive stress injuries. Not to minimize those types of injuries, because they're certainly painful, but more to make a point that these aren't catastrophic injuries like people being crushed or a loss of a limb or something else like that. Elon said that these types of injuries are addressed through better tooling and fixtures, as well as rotating workers to different responsibilities so they're not always performing the same task. The final bit there is not only good for physical health, but also mental, as it is of course boring to do the same thing day in and day out. Next up was an update on superchargers. First, the expansion of the network. Back in episode 406, I reported to you that the Tesla site had told us that there were currently 9,623 plugs available at 1,229 locations. Today's presentation, well, it didn't tell us the locations, but it did up that number to 9,969 plugs available worldwide. The next-gen superchargers that have been talked about recently are, quote, "mostly finished in design and will go into production hopefully around the end of this year," end quote. Elon said that it will be, quote, "quite a dramatic improvement," end quote. He ended talking about superchargers, saying that once the new system was in place, that Tesla would be even further accelerating supercharger deployment. We move to a quick update on the energy front now, and Elon informs us that Tesla has now deployed a full gigawatt hour of storage worldwide. Tesla plans to get its next gigawatt out in less than a year from today. As I've said before, the energy market is poised to be a huge revenue generator for Tesla. Elon believes for many years to come, quote, "each incremental year will be about as much as all the preceding years, which is a crazy, crazy growth rate," end quote. Speaking of crazy, this rate is actually production constrained. Elon tells us, quote, "We would actually be able to do more if we could produce more. And we are producing a lot of batteries. In fact, next quarter at the Gigafactory, we expect to make more battery capacity than all other EVs combined worldwide, including China. I mean, this is a really crazy amount of batteries. This one factory will make more than all the other batteries on Earth. I think really deserving that Gigafactory sort of title. It's really, really nutty," end quote. After a brief touch on Solar Roof that really didn't tell us anything more than we already knew, Elon again reiterated that the company expects to be GAAP profitable in Q3 and Q4, and triple or quadrupled down, I don't know how many times they've said it now, on the fact it does not expect to raise any more debt or equity. I think this is really kind of a no-brainer depending on two things. Firstly, that they hit their 5,000 car per week production target before the end of this month, as they believe, which is what they say all their financial models were built on. And the second thing is that those models are accurate. Hopefully, both answers are yes, and we finally get to stop hearing that tired bear investor refrain of Tesla going bankrupt. Now we get to some of the super good stuff. We turn now to a look at future products. Elon sets the unveil for Model Y more concretely now, as he sort of doubled back on the original date he gave on Twitter not long after putting it out there. But here he says, quote, "We're aiming to unveil the Model Y approximately March next year, and then go into production about maybe around 2 years from now, maybe a little less than 2 years, but basically first half of 2020 for production Model Y," end quote. Now that doesn't bode well for my bonus prediction at the beginning of the year, where I predicted a Q4 2021 start of production for the vehicle. But at the time, I was also taking Elon at his word that they'd build a new factory just for Model Y, and it's beginning to look more and more like Model Y may end up produced at Gigafactory 1. We'll see what we get there. Moving over to Semi and Roadster, Elon says that production will actually see better specs than what was unveiled for both of them. Better range for Semi, and on Roadster, he informs us that the cars we saw at the unveil are the base model performance cars. There will actually be a higher level performance package available. What do you call that? I mean, we're already at maximum plaid. Anyhow, he then added, quote, "It's going to have a SpaceX option package," end quote. As you heard just now, that got a good chuckle out of me and plenty of applause from the room. He further elaborated, quote, "It's important for us to show with the Roadster that an electric vehicle can outperform a gasoline car in every way, because gasoline cars still have sort of a halo effect, and I think if we can show that an electric car can outperform a gasoline car in every way, then we sort of get rid of that halo effect of gasoline cars, and I think that's quite a powerful thing perceptually for the general public," end quote. Now we get to the Twitter-submitted questions. First up, @WhoDadIs asks about the automation of the assembly line for Model 3 and if we'll see the famous Dreadnought 1.0 or 2.0 factories in whole or in part after this learning experience with Model 3. Elon admits to the automation mistakes that were made again and also reiterates that he sees Tesla's long-term advantage to be its prowess at manufacturing. He talked about one of their biggest mistakes being, quote, "trying to automate things that are super easy for a person to do, but super hard for a robot to do," end quote. Following this, he brings up some of the Tesla executive team to the stage to help answer the questions. So the next Twitter question, coming from frequent show Twitter engager Joel Sapp, asks about batteries, wondering if Tesla has broken through the magical $100 per kilowatt price barrier. JB Straubel fields the question, noting that while they can't talk about specific cost numbers, quote, "We are still very confident that we have the best price and performance of anything out there in the world. If there's something better, I don't know about it, and we've looked as hard as we possibly can," end quote. Elon then gave the answer Joel was probably looking for, and that is currently no, but maybe soon. Quote, "We think at the cell level, probably we can do better than $100 per kilowatt hour, maybe later this year, depending upon commodity prices. If commodity prices are roughly where they are today, then we'll probably do better than $100 per kilowatt hour at the cell level. And then with further improvements to cell chemistry and the production process, and more vertical integration on the cell side, for example, integrating the production of cathode and anode materials at the Gigafactory, and then an improved design of the module and the pack, we think long-term we can get below $100 per kilowatt hour at the pack level, which is really the key figure of merit for a car. Long-term meaning definitely less than 2 years," end quote. The next question asks when Gigafactory will be completely built. Elon says he believes they'll keep building on the Gigafactory for 4 or 5 years. However, he elaborates on the next Gigafactories. As we already know, new Gigafactories won't just produce batteries, they'll also serve as a vehicle and powertrain production plant as well. Elon says they're close to announcing something in China, and the head of worldwide sales for Tesla, Robin Ren, confirms finally that this factory will indeed be located in Shanghai. Elon gets the mic back and talks about how it will be important going forward to at least localize production on a continent level, again referencing the Chinese factory, but then drops this little nugget on us, that there is a European factory under consideration. Unless you think this is an off-the-cuff comment, after letting us know that we should likely get an announcement next month with more details on the Chinese factory, he tells us that we should get an announcement on the European factory before the year is out. Once, of course, they figure out where they're going to put it. Next question I'm covering is something I pondered and already asked on Twitter about a month or so ago, and that's how the battery recycling portion of the Gigafactory is coming along. JB again takes the mic, confirming that there is indeed a program to recycle packs. They partner with third parties on every continent to perform this recycling, and are performing their own research on how to better harvest usable materials first party from the spent packs. Next up is another question worrying about whether or not a $35,000 Model 3 will actually be produced, asking Elon to publicly guarantee that this will happen. Of course, he says yes, and says at the end of this year, the standard range pack will begin production, with volume production of the cars beginning in Q1 of 2019. So again, the target hasn't moved from the announced expectations. A note on autopilot with all those new Model 3s out there, in that trials for autopilot will make their way to the cars. While this is nothing new, having done it on Model S before, it's nice to know that people will get a free crack at the technology to try before they buy. This is probably coming out next month, according to Elon. Next up is a question for those of you that haven't yet placed an order for Model 3. The question asks what the wait time is for the car. Simply enough, here in the US, it's 3 to 4 months for the car that's available now. But if you're in a right-hand drive market, it's a wait of over a year. Next up is when do we get Model 3 test drives? Here we get a pretty surprising answer in my book. Elon says he expects it to start by the end of this month and be in almost all stores in North America by the end of next month. Considering that these are all supposed to be performance models, this is surprising and awesome news at the same time. And frankly, smart as well. What better way to spin up the performance production than to make cars that aren't going to customers' hands, and an accompanying service center should be just a call away if things do go wrong. Lastly here, Elon does finally go to the audience in the room for some questions. First up is a question on whether Tesla will produce compact or subcompact vehicles at some point soon. In the past, Elon has put the importance on the Tesla network, making this a moot point. But today we get a different answer, saying one should appear in, quote, less than 5 years, end quote. So we get another product announcement that somehow has to fit in the production schedule for the company. We'll see if or how quickly that one gets walked back. Next up is a question on when we can expect truly enhanced autopilot. Unfortunately, we got a non-committal answer of a few months on specifically the on-ramp to off-ramp capability and nothing more. It's clearly still a struggle on the autopilot development front. The next juicy question comes on exactly how much improvement we might expect from Supercharger V3 on a charging speed front. Elon tells us, quote, I wouldn't say there's an order of magnitude improvement, but I think a factor of 3 or 4 is possible. Now, it won't be applicable to all battery chemistries, so 2012 chemistry can't take the charge rate of current chemistry, end quote. At the end of this comment, he drops a little tidbit about an opportunity for range improvements. Quote, there's certainly opportunity for range improvements down the road where we'll be able to offer cars with ranges in excess of 400 miles, end quote. We finally get a request from PETA to ditch all leather from the cars, as the steering wheel does still utilize leather, despite all seating now using synthetics. The answer to this is basically that they're working on it, and if you request it, that's something that can actually be done now. But the most interesting bit is Elon remarking that Model Y will certainly have no leather. Quote, Model Y, for example, will not have any leather in it, including in the steering wheel, even if it does have a steering wheel, end quote. Interesting little quip, though considering current regulations and current capabilities of the cars, I'm not holding my breath on it. And that ends it for my 2018 annual shareholder meeting coverage. You can find the full-length, over hour and 15-minute long video at tesla.com/shareholder meeting. And while you're out and about on the internet, please do consider supporting the show financially through Patreon at patreon.com/Tesla Tidbits. Thanks as always to the super patrons out there supporting the show at the $10 plus level. They are John Waltauer, Drew Schuyler, John Waller, Mark and Sarah Thomas, Ryan Scarborough, Lee Sweet, William Henry Crew III, Dorian Steve Guberman, Bruno Kundichi, Joey Boots, Ralph and Cheryl Waterhouse, Adam Raymer Brown, Megawatt Photovoltaic Development, Todd Sullivan, Robert Healy, Mitch Long, Zortec LED Canada, and Morven Ogg. If you can't support with dollars, be sure to show your love with positive reviews and subscriptions on YouTube, iTunes, and other services across the internet. That's it for today's episode. If you have feedback for me, the best way to be heard is to tweet at Tesla Tidbits using the hashtag AskTeslaTidbits if you'd like your question to be considered for the show. I'll see everyone back here again tomorrow. Until then, keep it charged and hit the road.